related to trade, energy, and development. We have a very interesting panel. We have academicians, we have current and former diplomats, we have policymakers, and we have representatives of financial institutions. I guess we're only missing media and journalists, but I hope they're going to join us during the Q&A section. Let me introduce briefly our distinguished speakers, and we're going to continue in that sequence. So on my extreme right, Farhod Salim. He is the Deputy Chief of Mission of the Embassy of Tajikistan. Next to him, Amirjan Ubaidulayev, who is representative of Tajikistan for World Bank and International Monetary Fund. On my near right, Daniel Rosenblum, who is coordinator of US assistance to Europe and Eurasia, State Department. On my immediate left, Eric Rudenshaw, who is USAID Senior Officer in charge for Central Asia. Next, Ambassador Frankly Hader, former ambassador to Tajikistan. And on my extreme left, Michael Kane, professor at St. Mary's College of Maryland. We're going to start with the presentation, and if time permits, we're going to proceed with the Q&A section. So please, Farhod, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Since my ambassador was called back to Dushanbe very recently, we apologize that he couldn't take part at this event. That's why I'm going to read his remarks. Initially, it was planned that he's going to be participating. So, actually, the reason why he was called back, it's a very good reason that tomorrow we're going to be having the inauguration.
Sorry, could you please take it closer?
Really? Tomorrow we will have the official ceremony of opening the new building of the Foreign Ministry, so all our ambassadors back in Dushanbe. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to extend my deep appreciation and profound gratitude to the TAA and Rethink Institute for their great effort in organizing this event. It is a privilege to be part of this distinguished panel group and brief you on the energy, water, trade and development initiative of my country. With the support of the devoted endeavors of the people throughout the country, the government of Tajikistan since 2000 has succeeded within the national and sectorial programs and strategies to consistently undertake necessary measures aimed at addressing socio-economic challenges and ensure the gradual improvement of the living standards of people. In line with the achievement of the goals of the National Development Strategy associated with the ensuring energy security, food security, and breakout communication deadlock, promotion of real sector development is considered as one of the major guidelines of the government of Tajikistan. In this respect, government is first of all concerned to step-by-step exercise initiating reforms and the intended priorities in the midterm future. The primary task of the economic policy of the state includes stimulating development of the real sector of economy, particularly industry, energy, transport and communication, agriculture, as well as based on the entrepreneurial commitments and the potential of private sector to enlarge revenue part of the budget and ensure improved social protection of the people. In addition to other developments, facilitate measures, a conduct of series of economic and structural institution reforms are also envisaged for the achievement of energy security, which is one of the strategic goals of the country. In this context, fuel energy complex competitiveness, capacity building strongly depends on the promotion of energy saving policy, effective energy resources management, as well as on reduction of the energy loss. The President of the Republic of Tajikistan in his annual address to the Parliament noted, I will quote, A region to which we belong and maintain close cooperation with is Central Asia. This region is closest to us from many aspects. Great many affinities, commonalities, including shared history, similar living style, historic traditions, and diverse social and human factors bring the people of all our countries closer. If we take a close look at the analysis of the economic background of the region, we see at first hand that existing potential and opportunities in the region in case of a joint exercising would be sufficient for not only meeting domestic demands of these countries, but for the rapid growth of their export capacity. In other words, these factors will make the region self-sufficient. Benign intentions, political will, continued aspirations, and coordinations are needed to achieve these goals. We, from our own part, strongly support such regional cooperation, shared use of opportunities, and solution of any challenges through the constructive and helpful negotiations. Everyone knows well that we have declared 3 agendas as strategic goals of the country: energy independence, food security, and seeking way out of the Tajikistan communication deadlock. If you take a thorough look, are any of these intentions and commitments against the regional interest? Doesn't achievement of these goals considerably expand our joint opportunities? Is it bad if Tajikistan generates large quantity of cheap and environmentally friendly energy and meets overall electricity demand of the region? Would not it be good if transit of communication and facilities of Tajikistan are used for the interest of all countries in the region? And on the contrary, is there any damages to anybody if we use the opportunities and facility of our neighbors? No, we don't think so. We think there is no damage caused to anyone. All our goals and desires serve not only the interest of our country, but also meet the interest of our neighbors, all our regional partners, and they are completely in line and are harmonized with the regional plans and commitments. End of quote. The recognition of 3 global initiatives proposed by Tajikistan with a short span of time: declaration of the International Year of Fresh Water, Decade for Action Water for Life, and proclamation of 2013 as the International Year of Water Cooperation, has proved the recognition by the international community of Tajikistan's primacy in this process. For the implementation of the water-related internationally agreed development goals and sharing the best practices on cooperation among various water users, Government of Tajikistan is organizing a higher-level international conference on water cooperation under the auspices of United Nations in Dushanbe this August 20 and 21st. Tajikistan accumulates about 60% of water resources of Central Asia. However, presently country uses only about 15% of water energy potentials for the need of its people and economy. 5% of the water energy potential. Over the last 10 years, our country has been experiencing a severe power hardship during the winter season, seriously damaged population and infrastructures. Implementing hydropower projects, Tajikistan committed not only to act in its own interest, but sincerely stands for mutually beneficial regional cooperation and partnership. We are ready to jointly discuss and find common solutions for the challenges in an atmosphere of constructiveness and friendship. Tajikistan pursues open-door foreign policy, which means we want to maintain and develop good relations with all neighboring nations, as well as around the world. The upstream countries are mainly rich of hydropower resources in the region and have almost no hydrocarbon reserves, while the situation in the downstream countries is quite the opposite. They are among the richest countries of oil and gas resources. In this context, we do have a right to take our own hydropower resources as a national wealth. We are working for the improvement of investment climate in the energy sector. Along with the developing local energy grid, the Tajik government seeks increased opportunities for export of energy through an implementation of regional energy supply project, particularly the project CASA 1000, an interconnecting link of power transmission lines among Tajikistan, Afghanistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Pakistan. We do believe that rational use of hydropower would facilitate solution of water supply problem in the Central Asia in a long run, and would guarantee the growth of agricultural production that will enhance food security in the region. We always advocate a principle where a solution of the problem can only be achieved through constructive dialogue. Tajikistan in its energy development policy follows the principle which is based on the need of balance both national and regional interests. Tajikistan gives a great importance to the strengthening and developing relations with the United States and other partner countries. For development of regional cooperation, trade and investment framework agreement, TIFA, has been signed between the US and Central Asian countries in June 2004. Now being full-fledged member of the WTO, we invite the government of US for wider, more focused and mutually beneficial bilateral cooperations in the field of water power projects, implementation in the favor of Central Asian and Afghanistan. Last year, remembered as a historic making year, 20 years after the first meeting in Rio, the representatives of the countries gathered there again with the aim of discussing and identifying the most effective ways of achieving sustainable development. The Rio Plus 20 reiterated the commitments to the course towards sustainable development and ensuring an economically, social, and ecological sustainable future for our planet. Ensuring sustainable economic development aims to improve the population's living standards and quality of life in the strategic goals of the government of Tajikistan. Special attention is given to the effective, national, and protective use of natural resources that constitute the main dimensions of the green economy. Making access to the energy and priority issues is the key to achieving all MDGs. It is especially urgent for developing countries and remote mountain territories located far away from major infrastructures. In this regard, Tajikistan is no exception, and access to the energy is the key to the social and economic development and reduction of the poverty. In this context, one should regard the active cooperation of Tajikistan with the World Bank on developing technical and economic, social, and ecological assessment of the Rogun hydropower station, a project that is vitally important for my country. Tajikistan attaches a great importance to the interest of the landlocked developing countries, which are vulnerable due to their geographical locations. It stands to reason that a geographic isolation of Tajikistan and lack of the access to the sea constitutes a serious obstacle on the way to its sustainable development. There is no doubt that a reliable and unimpeded operation of the transportation and communication arteries that connect Tajikistan via the neighboring countries to the outer world is becoming vitally important under the circumstances. We recall the elimination of all artificial and economically unsubstantiated barriers and obstacles in the transportation and communication connections among the countries of the region that do not contribute to the development and strengthening of regional cooperation and partnership. In conclusion, let me to reiterate that Tajikistan, as a strong supporter of the broad and comprehensive cooperation, believes that only collective coordinated efforts, effective regional and international cooperation can serve as a foundation for the joint success and can make the world a better and safer place and prosperous. Thank you very much.
It is ladies and gentlemen, dear panelists. I would like to fully concur with the appraisal made by Mr. Salim, and in fact I thank him for this insightful statement. And I would also like to reiterate our authorities' appreciation to the TAA and the Everything Institute for organizing this event. It's very important for us to have this opportunity to exchange our views and to promote information or a new platform for future development. For me, it's a great pleasure to make my speech in front of such a competent audience. And today's event on energy, trade, and development is devoted to discussing issues related to development of mutual concept. And the concept has to address how to reduce poverty and for future development of social welfare through expansion or deepening of trade and economic cooperation between the states. In view of current wave of global financial situation or crisis, the subject deserves special attention and should remain relevant. Our authorities are undertaking all necessary measures to support real sector development of the country by modernizing and diversifying and development of energy-saving sector of industry, increasing its competitiveness and export capacity. Furthermore, the authorities remain fully committed on achieving main strategic challenges, energy and food security, as well as leading out the country from communication deadlock and modernization of the whole transport infrastructure. These are the main pillars for the future economic development, and then this will help to expand trade between the states. In order to create a platform for future development of the country in 2005, the President initiated a National Development Strategy, the Republic of Tajikistan for the period of 2015. And the strategy that is fully in line with Millennium Development Goals with the objective to facilitate arrangement of country's development process in the long-term perspective. As such, it is the main strategic document of the country that defines the priorities and general direction of the state policy, oriented to achieving sustainable economic growth, improvement of population access to the basic social services, and poverty reduction. Now I'd like to highlight important priorities which is underlined in this strategy. The first is public administration reform. We would like to have formation of the system of national development in the country that the main feature should rely on transparency, accountability, and fighting against corruption. The second pillar is private sector development and improving the business climate, based on expansion of economic freedom, strengthening poverty rights, and development of public-private partnership. And in fact, recently Tajikistan has endorsed the law on public-private partnership, and there is some current projects are ongoing with the financial institutions, specifically with the World Bank. And the third one is enhancing human capacity, increasing volume and quality of social services to a vulnerable population, increasing population participation in the development process, strengthening of social partnership. We should underline that to achieve this social and economic development, all this certainly depends on development of energy sector. And Tajikistan, as said by Farhad, is very rich in hydropower resources, which remains unutilized. Particularly, this relates to hydroelectric power plants. Despite high level of country electrification, the power supply in Tajikistan is limited. That significantly affects population's living condition. Now I'd like to turn to the medium term and the long term of the country's perspective on the energy development. Obviously, it's clear that in order to meet immediate demand of electricity, restoration of electricity networks, and construction of large HPP will require enormous financial and time costs. Consequently, these actions in the short-term perspective will not resolve the problem of limitation with supply of electricity in the country. Hence, the interim strategic direction of the country in terms of renewable energy resources and energy efficiency is focused on small and medium HPPs, as well as on low-cost and feasible measures on energy efficiency. In this regard, the authorities adopted the long-term program for construction of small HPP during 2007 and 2020. And this approach is very well welcomed with donors, and they are eager to cooperate with Tajikistan on construction of small and medium-sized HPP. This program envisaged the construction of 100 small HPP by the period of 2012 in the amount of 125.1 million US dollars, which annually will generate 480.6 million kilowatts of electricity. We understand that ensuring implementation of the interim strategy on development of medium and small HPP, it's possible to achieve the following results: reducing poverty by improving access to the electricity and facilitation and development of rural areas, as well as accelerating economic growth. Meanwhile, the country is experiencing the shortage of electricity at a rate of 3 and 3.5 billion of kilowatt hours. And thus, problem of electricity shortage can only be solved by construction of large HPP. Some work in this direction has been accomplished by mobilizing domestic and foreign investment. In this regard, I should say that Tajikistan, since it has enormous hydrology resources, it has also a comparative advantage of producing very cheap electricity, and then be as a country which could export electricity, and not in the Tajikistan to meet its demand growth, and also to the countries which also in high demand, particularly the Afghanistan and then Pakistan. So within our overall energy development, the construction of Rangoon HPP is of the highest strategic importance to address Tajikistan's energy, and thus lay the foundation for future growth and poverty reduction. This will be crucial to meet Tajikistan's growing energy needs, and also the population growth in Tajikistan on annual basis, it's like 2.5. So this means additional facilitation has to be endorsed, and then the demand for electricity is increasing year-on-year basis. Energy deficit, which the country is experiencing so far for the decades, is especially during winter period, means that educational and healthcare institutions, especially in rural areas, are not able to operate full-time, and the pumping stations that supply drinking water are closed, which lead to increasing infection diseases. In this connection, industrial production also has seasonal nature. The current legal framework of laws in the field of energy industry, there are many laws. It's law of the Republic of Tajikistan on energy saving, on the use of renewable energy sources. And we also have targeted comprehensive program to promote the use of renewable energy sources, such as energy of small rivers, sun, wind, biomass, energy of underground sources. Dear ladies and gentlemen, the acquisition of independence of Tajikistan has started its political and economic reform, structural reform, achieving of macroeconomic stabilization and subsequent growth, and formation of legal environment for the market economy. So Tajikistan faced many challenges. Since it's a landlocked country, it remains more vulnerable to external uncertainties. And there is external factors as well as some regional factors which pose challenges to the country development. I should also note that transport is very important also and has vital role which connects the country with other countries and local settlements. The work on reconstructing and considering of the new roads to overcome the communication isolation is ongoing. So during the independence period, Tajikistan has managed to create different roads with China, with Kyrgyzstan, and also with Kazakhstan to expand the trade and then opportunity abroad the country. For ensuring sustainable economic growth, Tajikistan has to overcome many challenges. As I said, access to the sea is very limited. There is absence of the access, remoteness from the world developed economic centers, lack of own accessible oil and gas fields, insufficient level of competition, insufficient level of human capital, low efficiency of international cooperation. However, Tajikistan has real opportunity and resources for transition to sustainable development, which are hydrological resources and fresh water of regional significance, various materials, favorable conditions for development of agriculture, industry, tourism, and availability of raw materials of agricultural goods for further industrial processing. In conclusion, availing this opportunity, I would like to also thank our partners for helping us, especially USAID on CASA 1000. This project has very importance in our country development because it not only helped Tajikistan, but it also helped other countries in region, Afghanistan and Pakistan, which during summer period they are in very need of electricity. And since this project is not only helping Tajikistan during the summer period, but it's also extremely helpful for Tajikistan for internal networks. In fact, because of the absence of this transition line, we cannot export our available resources during the summertime to Afghanistan and to Pakistan with a very cheap cost. And on annual basis, we just dispose water during the summer like in the amount of 4 billion. So, and if in economic terms, it like if we could be able to sell it, it will generate 280 million for Tajikistan. So I see a clear scope for donors or interested developing partners to engage in this project, which is very important in economic perspective. And Tajikistan also, to facilitate trade, created free economic zones, and also the US government helped us on the construction of bridge between Afghanistan and Tajikistan. This also facilitated the trade between two people. And Tajikistan has a very enormous incentives with regard to investors. And yes, it is enforced by laws. So I'm open to take your questions. Unfortunately, the time is very limited, and I want to pass words to our distinguished speakers. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here today to join all of you, and I want to thank the Turkic American Alliance for organizing this convention and this panel. It's a great opportunity for a good exchange of views, and I am the coordinator for U.S. assistance to Europe and Eurasia. I cover 18 countries in Central Asia, Europe, and Eurasia, and oversee the U.S. assistance programs in them. So I'm going to give you a perspective today of the U.S. relationship with Tajikistan in terms of what we're doing to help the Tajik people and government develop its economy and its energy sector in particular. I want to emphasize that while Tajikistan faces many, many challenges, and I'll talk about those later, there are also many opportunities for growth and development. And with the help of many international donors, and we are certainly one of many, the United States, we hope to allow Tajikistan to maximize those opportunities and help it along the road to economic prosperity. The first opportunity that I want to talk about is economic integration with the broader region. I think and our previous speakers noted this too, that Tajikistan's path to development really lies in its ability to integrate with the surrounding region and the rest of the world. And it took a major step in that direction very recently when it became a full member of the WTO on March 2nd. The many reforms that were enacted during the accession process have the potential to transform Tajikistan's economy and put in place a permanent basis for economic growth and prosperity if fully implemented. Implementation is always the difficult part, as opposed to just getting laws on the books. We've supported Tajikistan's aspirations to join WTO for many years, really more than a decade, when it first made its bid, and have continued to provide technical assistance and are continuing even after the accession with the implementation phase on things like making sure that all legislation meets WTO standards, improving intellectual property right protection, and training officials on WTO compliance. A second opportunity that presents itself for Tajikistan revolves around something that we've been calling the New Silk Road vision. I'm sure many of you have heard this before. It was first laid out in a speech that former Secretary Clinton made in Chennai in July 2011, where she outlined a vision of connecting the Central Asian states, Afghanistan, and South Asia through economic ties, transportation ties, trade ties, and energy ties. And the idea being that as the region becomes more integrated, it will attract more private investment and provide opportunities for all of its citizens. And I'm just going to briefly mention a few regional mechanisms that we think are essential to the fulfillment of this vision. And it is a vision, and it's a long-term one. I want to stress that. One is CARIC, the Central Asia Regional Economic Cooperation Program, which is being facilitated by the Asian Development Bank. That includes Afghanistan and Pakistan, and envisions a set of transport corridors and energy infrastructure connecting countries and driving economic growth. If the plans talked about within the CARIC framework materialize, it's hoped that about $20 billion can be mobilized to improve 6 transport corridors that cross Central Asia, several of which traverse Tajikistan. I also want to mention the OSCE, Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, of which Tajikistan is a member. Doesn't get talked about too much in terms of economic integration, but we actually think the OSCE has the ability to play a very constructive role in knitting the region together. Already in Tajikistan, OSCE has built several cross-border trade facilitation centers and is running a border and customs training academy in Tajikistan to train border officials from the region. Also worthy of mention is the so-called Istanbul process on regional security and cooperation for a secure and sustainable Afghanistan. Tajikistan joined its neighbors in supporting this process in 2011, and as a clear region-wide declaration of support for a stable and prosperous Afghanistan, it's an important step for the countries of the region to control their own future and to make commitments to regional stability. And finally, last year, Tajikistan hosted the 5th meeting of the Regional Economic Cooperation Conference for Afghanistan, or RECA, and which is focused on a limited set of achievable projects and reform initiatives designed to unlock private investment in the region. We think this has been and will be a powerful tool for promoting cooperation and partnership. So the regional integration piece is a very important opportunity for Tajikistan. A second opportunity, which was emphasized by my previous the 2 speakers here, is of course energy, and the development of Tajikistan's energy sector provides a very important platform for this economic cooperation that I was speaking about. And we're trying in various ways to help Tajikistan maximize its energy production in the summer as a way of increasing revenues and decreasing shortages in the winter months. We have several projects aiming to do that. I think my colleague Eric from USAID may speak about some of this. I won't go into too much detail, but suffice it to say that we're working both at the macro level in terms of reforms in the energy sector, and also on some specific projects at the micro level to demonstrate what's possible. And I'll note one in particular, working with Pamir Energy, which has been helping, through which we've helped Tajikistan extend distribution lines from the Tajik side to Afghanistan to power 2 villages in Afghanistan. So as a kind of demonstration project, we think such things hold much promise. On a much bigger scale, I'll mention again, and Mr. Ubaidulov just spoke about this, CASA 1000, which we have supported in various ways through technical assistance. This, as everyone, I think many of you in this room will know, is being facilitated by the World Bank and aiming to build transmission lines that will allow for the export of summer surplus hydroelectric power from Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan to Afghanistan and Pakistan. And Tajikistan would greatly benefit from this project being carried out. Finally, in the energy field, let me mention the study that was completed in November of last year by the World Bank called the Winter Energy Study. When I attended the development forum hosted by President Rahmon in December in Dushanbe, and this report was highlighted there by many of the donors, including its recommendations of how Tajikistan could meet its growing energy demand during the winter months. And I'll just note that some of the key recommendations in that report included an increase in electricity prices to encourage residential customers to ration their use of energy, combined with an improved social safety net to help the most vulnerable parts of the population afford power, ambitious energy efficiency improvements, and also recommendations with respect to the operation of the Talco aluminum company, which of course consumes a lot of the country's power right now. So there are many opportunities in energy, in trade, and regional integration, and we and many other donors are doing whatever possible to help Tajikistan take advantage of those opportunities. Let me just take a minute to talk about the challenges, the other side of the equation, and what is happening in those areas. Major challenge in terms of countering transnational crime and especially narcotics trafficking. We're working very closely and very intensely with Tajikistan's core law enforcement agencies to improve the ability of the police to investigate all types of crime and promote information sharing among agencies and with neighboring countries. And in particular, we've done a lot of work over the years and continue to work closely with the border guards on the border with Afghanistan to develop their capacity. Another area of challenge, again alluded to by earlier speakers, is of course food security. Our Feed the Future initiative is focused on helping farmers to improve production, income, and nutrition in on their farms. And lastly, I'll mention education as an area as a major challenge. The education system is underfunded and underdeveloped, and we have several programs aimed at both the primary and secondary level at trying to address that problem. And I'd be remiss if I didn't also mention something that was an earlier speaker talked about, which is corruption and the need for more accountability and transparency. I mentioned this at the development forum in Dushanbe in December, and actually President Rahmon commented on my comments on corruption as being a key priority for the government. And I won't dwell on that now for lack of time, but I'm sure we can talk about this more during the question period. So in conclusion, let me say that the US government has an enduring commitment to Tajikistan's development. It began long before the conflict in Afghanistan back in the early 1990s, and will continue beyond 2014 and beyond the plans to draw down our military presence in Afghanistan. And I think our work has had some results, but faces many challenges, and we continue to look forward to working with our Tajik partners towards that end. Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle. We're going to continue with Eric, please.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Eric Rudenschold. I'm the Senior Officer in Charge for Central Asia with the U.S. Agency for International Development. You won't see my picture in the program, so you can actually watch me instead of that. I'm glad to have a chance to discuss the important work being done in Tajikistan by the U.S. Agency for International Development, better known as USAID, to address the practical challenges facing Tajikistan that are impeding the country's development. Compared with other Central Asian states, Tajikistan faces a combination of unique constraints to progress that inhibit trade and investment and even threaten the future of the country itself. As Dan Rosenblum, my colleague, explained, USAID works across many different areas of development. Today I'm going to focus on one area alone, something that you probably are unfamiliar with. I'd like to discuss a few of the constraints first, and then how USAID is working with the Tajikistan government and people to address those concerns. When we look at constraints in general, one of the key ones is the legacy of the Soviet Union. Another is the lack of in-country earning power. And third are the serious food shortages and resulting malnourishment. All of these combine to provide Tajikistan with fierce challenges. And if I can venture to be bold here, to say there are uncommon opportunities to set a course towards progress and development. 20 years later, we still look at the former Soviet Union as a known quantity, something we basically understand. States that have common heritages, common legacies. However, the disintegration of the highly controlled, centralized Soviet command economy, manipulated, organized, administered from Moscow, has left Tajikistan independent, but the poorest country in Central Asia. This landlocked country inherited few viable Soviet-era industries and has poor access to limited markets in the region for the goods that it does produce. In 2001, 83% of Tajiks were subsisting below the World Bank poverty rate of less than $2 a day. In 2009, that poverty rate declined to 46%, a significant improvement, but still a shocking statistic. Half of the country, the population and workforce of the country, is living at the poverty level. Much of the decline in poverty from 2001 to 2009 is due to remittances. The lack of opportunity within Tajikistan for citizens to earn a living wage to support their families has forced able-bodied workers to seek work abroad. Remittances are the wages earned by Tajik workers employed in other countries that are sent back home. Tajikistan has the largest remittance rate as a percent of GDP of any country in the world. Upwards to 20% of the population are estimated to have immigrated to Russia to work. Remittances account for an estimated half of the country's GDP. Let it not be said that the Tajik people are afraid to work, or that they lack the initiative to try and provide for their families. But it is nevertheless difficult to survive on less than $2 a day. Even with remittances, many families lack sufficient funds and access to food. In some regions, children suffer from malnourishment. Many suffer from chronic undernourishment, which results in stunted growth, a condition that is largely irreversible. Children may never regain the height or body weight lost, and may likely even face premature death later in life. How serious is the nutrition problem? Half of the population of Tajikistan is under the age of 30. In the Katlan province and many other regions, nearly 1/3 of children are malnourished. 1/3 are stunted. Compounding the nutritional challenge, 40 to 60% of the population does not have access to safe drinking water. This compounds the health and nutritional challenges that the country faces, and it results in risks of severe illness. These are all serious handicaps to the development of Tajikistan. With a significant portion of its workforce fighting for its survival, it may be difficult to envisage trade, manufacturing, or other industries in the country flourishing. The challenges are significant, there's no doubt, and tackling the problems is not easy. But we believe that by targeting USAID assistance to specific areas of need and promise, and the help that we and other donors provide can make a significant difference as Tajikistan tracks a course towards the future. One target is removing barriers to regular nourishment. There's a tremendous need, and because of it, USAID has made Tajikistan one of 20 original countries worldwide selected for increased investment in food security. These efforts, called Feed the Future, mean that USAID will join with the Tajik government and other international donors and local farmers to increase food security by working to produce more marketable crops, which in turn raise rural incomes, increase nutrition for farmers and their families. These programs do much more, but I don't have the time to describe all of the benefits. But as a focus country, USAID has assigned an average of $10 million in annual funding for Tajikistan's Feed the Future program. This will put into operation a multi-year network of food security programs that are designed to help reestablish Tajik agriculture as a profitable industry and a source of nutrition for the country. The current state of agriculture in Tajikistan poses additional challenges to this effort to reduce food insecurity. Perhaps the most significant challenge is the lack of arable land. In Tajikistan, only 7% of land can be farmed successfully. That's less than 1/10 of a hectare of cultivatable land per capita. That's not much to work with, when most of the best arable land is committed towards the production of cotton, a Soviet legacy crop which neither feeds nor profits much of the population. It compounds the challenge. So the emphasis on producing profitable crops on limited arable land is a key objective of USAID. Feed the Future programming supports this priority by working with farmers to shift away from labor-intensive, low-profit crops to increase production of fruits and vegetables, foods that have greater potential for rural households, increasing their incomes, affording more nutritious food for themselves, and to produce more nutritious food for broader consumption. Another challenge is that 3/4 of the country's population of 7.8 million people live in rural areas, generally in the vicinity of farming land. Not surprisingly, 3/4 of the population has traditionally been employed in agriculture. However, agriculture has only contributed 1/4 of the country's GDP. Farming, as it has been practiced, has not been profitable for the majority of Tajik workers. Today, many, if not most, able-bodied male farm workers have gone abroad to earn a living. And women who have little training or business experience have been left to farm. USAID programs provide education for small-holding farmers, many of them female, on basic business methods, accounting, such as how to invest in more expensive seeds that will actually produce larger yield. Basic nutrition, so that farmers, who are also now often the people who prepare food, understand how to select more beneficial and more profitable crops. Many of Tajikistan's challenges are systemic, projecting needs that extend beyond farmer groups to adjacent sectors, water, transit, etc. These require long-term interest, support, and will generate long-term progress, we know. USAID welcomes the broad commitment of the government of Tajikistan towards food security and to policy reform priorities that establish this foundation for lasting improvement. For example, under the government's leadership and with donor support, a comprehensive land, water, and agrarian reform program has been developed. USAID works with the State Land Committee, and a host of ministries, including agriculture and health, to support the government's commitments to diversified and intensified farming and to improve health, hygiene, and nutrition. A final crucial element of the Feed the Future effort is coordinating our work with other donors to multiply the impact of very limited assistance funds. For example, USAID and World Bank are concentrating their efforts in the Katlan province of Tajikistan, the region that's most impoverished and most malnourished, but a region that also has tremendous potential. It is the second highest vegetable and fruit production region. It has functioning irrigation systems, and it has access to trade routes. Katlan is a natural corridor linking Afghanistan with populations in western Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, and beyond. Providing assistance to this province will contribute to improving trade and its integration locally and regionally. It is believed that the impact of assistance to this populous region will spill over into other regions of Tajikistan and beyond, particularly as the government becomes more adept at implementing agriculture extension and education programs. USAID's Feed the Future program serves many purposes: improve nutrition, an overall healthier workforce and population, increased, modernized, and profitable agricultural production, and expanded capacity for regional trade and regional markets. We know the investment and modernization is large, the need for it is quite large. So too are expectations of this fledgling program. In 1 year's time already, we are seeing tens of thousands of farmers having been trained to address land usage issues, the application of better irrigation techniques, along with the introduction of nutrition and business principles. Perhaps more interesting, we have already seen a $2.3 million increase in sales from Feed the Future supported farms in the past year. Although the challenges Tajikistan faces are significant, with a helping hand, we are seeing that they are not insurmountable. Thank you.
It's always hard to follow It's always hard to follow 4 or 5 great speakers, all of whom steal your best points. I'm Ambassador Huddle, and I, before, was the head of the embassy in Burma, often known as the world's richest poor country, and I did my doctor's degree at Harvard in cotton in Central Asia, and that is one of the big issues. Cotton came about in Central Asia because of the U.S. Civil War, and that's how it came. It was always done for first the Russian market, then the Soviet command economy, and it left Tajikistan with an unfortunate inheritance, which he's already talked about in some way. In essence, the U.S. got involved after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and then even more so right after 9/11. I came there about 3 weeks later, was told to set up an embassy and try to make more significant a relationship which had been rather distant because of security concerns. And in the process of so doing, I quickly realized that Tajikistan had many, many obstacles. It was hard to see the glass as half full. It's the highest country in the world in average altitude. Most people don't realize that. It has, as Eric has just said, it has the highest percentage of remittances. The second is Eritrea, where you'll see cab drivers here that brought me over. These are not easy issues to deal with. It's highly isolated. It has basically either poor or semi-hostile neighbors for the most part. Even its one powerhouse neighbor, China, it's the back door of China, and it's a long ways away from the main centers of Chinese economy. What do you do when you have a situation like this? How do you overcome it? Eric has discussed the social issues, and I think the basic structure. I think Mr. Rosenblum did the same thing. The Tajik embassy representative, as well as the IMF representative, did the same thing as well. From my perspective, there are only about 3 or 4 things that they haven't already touched that I would mention. One is mining. Mining has a great advantage that about 80 to 90% of all the cost of mining is putting in infrastructure in order to extract things. So roads do get built. That's how the U.S. West was opened up in large part, was mining. And Tajikistan has got for example, one of the world's major silver deposits. And I think as the government is now in WTO and improving its ability to attract foreign investment, that mine could become the node point, if you will, for significant development. Silver, gold, zinc, lead, precious stones. And they all have the advantage that they're relatively light in weight, and so therefore they can be profitable for long-distance export, which is, of course, how cotton first got its started there as well. You can't ship things that are very heavy. Secondly, the reliance on the aluminum plant, in my humble view, aluminum is in oversupply now. The world price is about $1 a pound, unlike copper, which is almost $4. And in the long run, I think what they need to do is put that in a relatively more minor role in the country's mosaic of economic treasures, and be much more careful in doing things like the refurbishing the so-called pots of the aluminum plant when power is in short supply, rather than doing it as they do now when power is in high supply. There are many other things like that. In terms of the second point I wanted to point out, I guess, is that the United States itself, when I first got there, we were looking at trade and development with the idea of the Silk Road and so on, and trying to figure out a way to integrate it first into Afghanistan. And it was sort of ironic. We built a bridge to Afghanistan. You know, from the former Soviet Union to Afghanistan, the United States builds a bridge. And I want to close with just a little war story of how that came about, because I think often trade and development, you have to have certain accidents of fate, as in Kazakhstan, where suddenly you have an enormous oil find, which Tajikistan may have. Tethys is onto something, perhaps, and it may be that that will be a significant find that is worth about $1 trillion over time. In theory, they're claiming it's as large as the North Sea. Other accidents can happen as we built a bridge to Afghanistan. That came about largely because of 9/11. And it was the first effort the U.S. made in what was actually a very Chinese type of development, where you build a bridge first to nowhere, that was said at the time, in hopes that ultimately it will become a node point, which is in fact historically correct. And you can see it all over the world where development projects wind up, if they're far-sighted, in getting people to come. Build it first and they will come, as the Chinese do, for example, and not India. And the results are very obvious. That bridge came about in the Oval Office of the White House. It was a funny story. Then Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld had come to Tajikistan, and he'd gotten orders from the president to get a base in Tajikistan. I sat in the meeting, translated, in fact, that base was then given to them. And the Tajik government then asked the Russians to leave the base, which was a big deal. Well, then Rumsfeld changed his mind and decided to use Kyrgyzstan instead, just as the base was about ready to open. The trains are already coming, bringing ammunition. Christmas Eve, I had to go in and see President Rahman on Christmas Day to tell him what was not a very nice piece of news, that we weren't going to use the base. The Tajik government, to their credit, took it like a man and didn't say anything about it. We just kept the relationship going. A year later, there was a state visit by the president, and he came, 21-gun salute. He stayed in Blair House. And the next morning, he went to the Oval Office. And before the president of Tajikistan came in, Secretary Powell, Secretary Rumsfeld, Condoleezza Rice, myself, and President Bush were sitting around together, and Rumsfeld turned to me and said, well, how did the Tajiks take it when we didn't use the base that they offered? And I said in English, well, they pulled up their socks like a man and marched on. And Secretary Rumsfeld said, no, Pancho, that's my nickname, be serious. And I said, well, they didn't say anything public. They took it like a man. And Secretary Rumsfeld then said, I guess we owe them one. And I said, well, I think so. He says, well, what can we do? And I said, well, for 2 years, a year and a half actually, I've been trying to raise money for a bridge through his organization. I'd gotten $1 million from the Norwegian, $1 million, but we needed about another $12 million to make it happen. And I told the story. Secretary Rumsfeld, as they often do at that level, didn't say anything. He just sort of nodded. 3 weeks later, a check showed up at the embassy to the defense attaché for this $10 million. And in fact, the defense attaché came to me and said, you know, Mr. Ambassador, they're not allowed to just send money like this from the Department of Defense. And I said, well, Major, go ahead and rebuke Secretary Rumsfeld. I'm sure that will help your career. The money was thereafter. With that note money, the bridge got built. And in a sense, it was an accident of fate. But the key point is you have to prepare the way for fate to be useful. And I think the basic infrastructure of both of the human needs, the legal framework, rule of law, transparency, predictability for businessmen, and so on, all of these things that the other panelists have talked about, they're the key elements to be there so that when that big oil discovery comes, when the silver is exploited, that the Tajikistan's sort of historic role as part of the Silk Road can be rebuilt in a modern version of that, to include everything from high-speed optics to modern transportation arteries. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador, and thank you for sharing this story. As I understood correctly, it hasn't been shared before. Thank you for saving this for us. Thank you. And Michael, you have the most difficult job to speak as the last, but not the least speaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Vladimir, and thank you to the Rethink Institute and TAA for their gracious invitation. It's I got to say, it's not really my pleasure to follow you, Mr. Ambassador, with that story. I have no such story to tell like that. Instead, I want to take my 1 minute, I believe I have, to discuss a little bit about a couple themes that have already been spoken about. Of course, one of the main development issues in Tajikistan today, we've heard from this panel, is the electrical system and the production of additional electricity. And the problem of insufficient electrical production not only hurts commercial enterprises, but it disproportionately hurts the poor, in particular rural poor. And we've already heard just how low levels of developments in rural areas, how significant and pervasive it is throughout the country. Electricity is in some ways a basic need in modern societies. It's a foundation for building human capacity, for educating girls in the evening by light, by helping women cook in their homes and not have fires. There are many, many different development priorities that sufficient amounts of rural electricity provide to countries like Tajikistan. And we've heard about different kinds of production needs, and I certainly believe that additional construction of new hydroelectric power plants is needed. I think, and I've written about this before, that smaller is better. Having small and medium-sized HPP plants has a very small footprint or a much smaller footprint on the environment, and it stands to provide energy for those who are the least well off in the country. For that reason, I believe that donors should strongly support this, not just the USAID, which has worked on this issue before, but also many of the other donors as well. I'll take a little bit of time to talk about something that was not touched on, but is significant and important to provide sufficient levels of energy in Tajikistan, and that is the not simply the state of infrastructure, but the institutional arrangements to provide power. In modern societies, the provision of power is actually like rocket science. It is complex. These are complicated markets, and they require highly developed institutions and regulatory schemes in order to deliver that electricity to all segments of the population. As you probably know, there are, despite some hope recently in Tajikistan, yes, there's some good news. Barki Tojik, the main electricity supplier in the country, has lifted restrictions in rural areas recently. This is improved upon. These restrictions now have been lifted much earlier than even last year. There are some additional electricity available for export to Afghanistan. We heard that. And of course, we've also heard from the ambassador speaking about the high-level UN-sponsored international conference on water issues, which stands to provide hope for different countries to really work together to share water resources as well as energy resources in a way that's, I think, sustainable and benefits the region. There are really, despite this good news, there's really, when you think about Tajikistan's electricity system, there's two features of it that are really require consideration and assistance. The first, as you just heard, is the legacy of the Soviet system. Tajikistan's energy system was not intended to be an autonomous system. It was intended to be part of a larger Central Asian network. And now that that network has basically collapsed, and trade in the region on energy issues has diminished from about 24 gigawatts of electricity down to about 4 gigawatts of electricity. This has caused substantial problems, not simply for Tajikistan, but for all the other states in the region. And in this sense, any kinds of changes that occur, there's large potential, I think, for gains here in trade. That is the hope that I think exists for many, for the government of Tajikistan and other governments, that they can overcome some of these international disagreements on both water and energy, which will allow them to build a much more sustainable network that provides 24 hours of power to not only cities but also to areas in rural areas. Let me just, I know we don't really have much time, Vladimir, so let me just focus on one aspect of one of the problems domestically. And that really is some of the problems that exist with Barki Tojik. One of the issues in here is that electricity is really used to support crucial state investments. And as you've heard, about 42% of all electricity goes to aluminum production in the country. And one of the problems here is that non-payment for electricity is widespread, not among people of Tajikistan, but really associated with government entities like TALCO, which owes approximately $22 million in arrears to Barki Tojik, as well as the Ministry of Land, Reclamation, and Water Resources. These kinds of these debts that are owed to Barki Tojik requires them to really absorb these losses and makes it very difficult for them to sustain electricity production. The other thing I'll end with is the recommendations by the Asian Development Bank on the restructuring of Barki Tojik into a much more commercial entity. There are many, many difficulties here with the organization, the institutional organization of Barki Tojik that need a great deal of effort and emphasis in order to create a modern electrical producer, distributor, one that can make investments in infrastructure and pass along those costs to different consumers, whether they be commercial or residential consumers. And finally, there has to be, and I agree with this, and I know USAID has worked on this, the implementation of social safety nets for electricity. This is absolutely crucial, and I think Pamir Energy has actually, in the autonomous region, has been successful in designing such tariffs to help the poorest there. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it, and it's very nice to be here, Vladimir.